Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. Jason, about a month ago I asked you about the squat being a good primary hamstring movement, and we both came to the same conclusion that it isn't necessarily a very good option. But what about a deficit deadlift for quads? I've been pulling from a 3-inch deficit for the last couple of months, and it seems like, based solely on feel, which I recognize isn't the best determinant, the quads are significantly more active during a deficit deadlift than the hamstrings are during a back squat. Any word, what do you think? Couldn't the deficit deadlift based on knee and hip angle be a primary quad builder? P.S. Still squatting, just something I felt. No, it can't be a primary quad builder. And the simple reason is because even a deficit deadlift, and you guys saw me do a 3-inch deficit deadlift the other day, right? I did one on my max effort day. You're not getting a full movement of the knee joint, right? Now, are you working the quads more than on a normal deadlift with a deficit? Sure. You're actually working the hamstrings even more also, in my experience, if you go just by feel on the hamstrings. But if you start looking at the knee angle, you're just not utilizing the quad entirely, right? You need to go to at least a 90-degree bend in the knee if you really want to effectively work the quads. Just like if you look at the studies we've seen on half squats, that half squats miss entire sections of the quad. Like very, very little of the lower quad gets recruited on the half squat, but the upper thigh gets worked quite a bit. I would suggest you're going to see the same thing with the deficit deadlift. It's just not capable of building the thighs up that effectively. Granted, if that's all you did, yes, your thighs would grow. But they are going to grow a hell of a lot more from squats than they are from the deadlift. At least the quads will. Hamstrings are obviously going to get more from the deadlift. But we kind of come back to the point of, is the deficit deadlift a good exercise for overall lower body and back development? You bet it is. And it's an exercise that I recommend. But no, it cannot train the quads as much as any form of squat can, just simply due to the range of motion involved. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I've been doing a 4-day upper-lower split with DUP, which is daily undulating periodization. On my heavy lower day, 1 to 3 reps, I am at the point where I can no longer squat and deadlift heavy in the same day. Whichever exercise comes second greatly suffers. I understand that rep ranges should not be mixed, but I have temporarily switched to do heavy deadlifts, light deadlifts, and then heavy deadlift, light squat for my 2 lower days a week until I can find a better solution. Do you have any tips? Thanks, coach. That doesn't sound like DUP. That sounds like concurrent periodization where you're running a heavy and a light. All right, that's not DUP. You've got to be running like 3 different energy systems, or at least 3 different rep ranges throughout the week spread out. That's not DUP. Daily undulating periodization. All right. So in any event, we'll call it your concurrent training. What do you mean you can't do them back to back? What are you talking about? You're going to power lift? You're going to compete in powerlifting? You're going to compete in strength lifting? You better get some practice doing max deadlifts after doing a max squat. Because we have to do it in competition. So let me ask you a question when it comes to this. How is it that you think powerlifters go and deadlift 800 pounds after hitting a 700-pound squat in the same meet? How do you think they do that? Well, number one, they get used to it. Right. Number 2, you accept that if you deadlift after you squat, that you're going to, in most cases, move slightly less weight. Right? You're going to move slightly less weight. So what's wrong with that? What's the big deal? Are you trying to set a world record in your workouts? So what's the problem? So what? You find that you can only deadlift 500 instead of 530 if you have to hit a 450 squat first. So what? Do you think you're getting less training response from it? Do you think it's not registering as being really, really heavy to your body? It's fine. It's perfectly fine. What is the point? I always say we go to the gym to build strength, not to demonstrate it. Yeah, that's normal. You're going to deadlift a bit less after a max squat sometimes. Okay? Why is this a problem? Do you know it's also going to be really hard hitting a second heavy squat after doing a first one? So do you stop at 1 rep on the squats, or do you stop at 1 set? Of course not. Yeah, it's going to be hard. Yes, your performance is sometimes going to suffer. Deal with it. It's normal. You're going to have to do it in competition if you ever power lift. I just don't see what the problem is. It's not like you're not getting a training effect on the deadlift just because you can't pull quite as much if you squat first. You're worrying about the wrong thing. Let's go back to the point. You're going to the gym to build strength, not to demonstrate it. You can go ahead and set your world records when you get to the platform. Not a big deal if you come up 10, 20 pounds short in the gym. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. I am a novice 14-year-old, 145 pounds, 5'10", and very small and very lean, maybe 12% body fat. My question is that do you think that it is realistic for me to bulk to 195 to 200 pounds in a year? I really want to build my strength base, and recomping / cutting can always be done later. All right, this is going to be an example of taking the bulking a little bit too far, brother. A little bit too far. No, you don't need to gain that much weight. You're talking about gaining 50 to 55 pounds in your first year? You're a teenager, bro. You're not going to gain more than about 15, at most 20 pounds of fat-free mass inside of a year. So you're talking about as a novice lifter, gaining more than half of the weight that you gain is body fat? No, there's no need to do that. Tell you what, why don't you just focus on gaining a pound or 2 every month? How's that sound? All right, put on 20 pounds this year. I think a 20-pound weight gain, you at 14 years old, you start training. If over the course of the next year, the next 12 months, you put on about 20 pounds, that's going to be about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds per month, right? 1.5 to 2 pounds a month, or about 0.5 pound a week. I think that would be perfect. That would be perfect. You're going to gain mostly muscle. You'll gain a little bit of fat. All right, you gain a little bit of fat, not very much. You're probably going to end up looking leaner. You'll gain mostly muscle that way. I think that's what you need to do. Don't get fat, and you don't need to go up to 200 pounds that quick. Take your time with it. I would say over the next 3 years, get to 200 pounds. How's that sound? By the time you're 17, try to be 200 pounds. But if you do that at this point right now, it's going to be mostly fat that you gain. And that's just too much. That's going to compromise your health, and you're not really going to gain that much extra muscle for having done it. All right, next question and last question of the week. Basically, I was 99% done with my novice progression. However, for some reason, I had to stop and regressed a fair amount for the 3 months I was away. In order to get back, should I perform a novice linear progression or go with an intermediate level program? Thanks in advance. Well, why would you even ask that? If you haven't trained for 3 months, I don't care if you were an advanced lifter. I don't care if you were squatting 550 and deadlifting 650 with a 425-pound bench press. If you take 3 months of training away, you need to do linear progression when you come back, right? You need to do linear progression. You have detrained massively. You're going to be capable of making new gains over again, in addition to the muscle memory. In fact, I'm going to say if you took 3 months away, you're probably going to make gains faster in your first 4 to 6 weeks coming back than you made the first time you were in the gym. You're going to get faster than new gains because you're going to have muscle memory stacked with it. You're going to gain really rapidly unless you run an intermediate program. What's going to happen if you run an intermediate program? You're going to make intermediate gains, which is going to be about half of novice gains. Instead of novice gains are faster, which you're going to be capable of doing, you're going to choose to gain less. Why would you do that? Never run a more advanced routine than you are, unless your goal is to make slower gains. Intermediate routines give you intermediate gains, advanced routines give you advanced gains. it's never a good thing to gain slower than you should be unless you just happen to want to for no reason, right? No, absolutely. Run a novice progression of some type again. Run straight linear progression, right? Run straight linear progression until you are an intermediate, and then do an intermediate program. But you're absolutely not an intermediate right now. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.